Can you imagine what it's like to wake up every day afraid? Not the fleeting fear of bad news or a difficult commitment, but that chronic fear that clings to your skin, that accompanies you from the moment you open your eyes until bedtime, if you can even sleep. Now multiply that by 30 years, more than 10,000 days living under the shadow of someone who should have protected you, but who imprisoned you. It's hard to comprehend, isn't it? But for Dorothy, that was the reality for the 3 longest decades of her life. When she turned 65, something changed. It wasn't a miracle. It wasn't a sudden divine intervention. It was an inner voice, almost a desperate whisper, that finally shouted louder than fear. Enough. At that moment, Dorothy made the bravest decision anyone in their senior years could make. She chose to start over. She chose to run away and stay with me until the end. Because what happened next will show you that age was never the problem. The problem was always believing it was too late. Do you know that feeling that life has already passed you by? That opportunities have slipped away, and now all that's left is to accept the circumstances, however suffocating they may be. Many people carry this weight, especially those over 60 or 70 years old. Society teaches us that there's a right time for everything, to love, to build, to start over. And when that time passes, it seems we lose the right to dream of something different. Dorothy believed this for a long time. She looked in the mirror and saw a woman who no longer had the strength, who had already given everything, who just needed to endure until the end. But have you ever stopped to think that perhaps this narrative is completely wrong? Dorothy's story isn't about victimization. It's about something much deeper and more universal. It's about the moment when we finally understand that living in fear isn't living. It's about realizing that carrying the weight of abuse, emotional violence, and psychological control isn't destiny. It's a choice we can change, even when everything seems impossible. And look, I know it might sound easy to say this from the outside, but when you learn the details of her journey, you'll understand that it wasn't easy at all. What you're about to discover might surprise you, and, who knows, even change the way you see your own battles. 30 years is almost half a lifetime. It's enough time to raise children, build a career, travel, the world. But for Dorothy, it was 30 years of learning to be invisible, to make no noise, to have no opinion, to not fully exist. Have you ever been through that? Have you ever felt like you were just living to avoid dying, but without truly being alive? That was her routine for decades, until, at 65, something inside her broke, or rather, something finally broke free. And you know what's most incredible about this story? It's not just the fact that she ran away. It's what came after. It's the reconstruction of a woman who had to relearn everything. How to sleep peacefully, how to smile without guilt, how to simply breathe without feeling that the air was too heavy. Dorothy became a living symbol that it's never, absolutely never, too late to be reborn. So take a deep breath, because now you're going to learn every detail of this story. But quickly, before we continue, if this story is touching you in any way, leave a like below. This helps more people find this content. And if you like true stories of overcoming adversity and starting over, subscribe to the channel, because there's much more coming. Also, leave a comment about what you think of Dorothy's story so far. Your participation makes all the difference. Now, let's get to what really matters, because what Dorothy experienced after her escape is as transformative as the decision to leave itself. To understand the magnitude of this transformation, you need to know a little about the world in which Dorothy lived for so long. I won't go into graphic details because that's not what this story is about. It's about something much more subtle and devastating. The routine of someone who learns to live walking on eggshells. You know that expression? Well, that's exactly it. Dorothy woke up every day calculating every word, every gesture, every look. The slightest distraction could trigger an emotional storm that she no longer had the strength to face. And the worst part wasn't just the fear. It was the silent belief that had been building up over the years. Maybe I deserve this. Maybe this is just how it is. Maybe I'm not capable of living any other way. This is the hidden truth behind many abusive relationships, especially when they last for decades. It's not just about the visible violence. It's about the invisible wear and tear on the soul, the kind that corrodes self-esteem so slowly that you don't even realize when you've stopped believing in yourself. Dorothy spent her 50s, her 60s, watching life unfold through a fogged window. She saw other women her age traveling, laughing with friends, celebrating birthdays lightly. And her? She merely survived. Each day was a silent negotiation with fear. Each night was an attempt to fall asleep quickly enough not to overthink. The years went by, and with them, the feeling that it was too late for any significant change solidified. After all, who starts over at 65, right? But here's the turning point that few talk about. It's never too late to choose dignity. It's never too late to look in the mirror and decide you deserve more. And that's exactly what began to happen inside Dorothy. It wasn't a sudden ray of light. It was an accumulation of small, painful realizations, as if each difficult day was a drop filling a cup that would eventually overflow. This journey of self-discovery, even before the escape, is fascinating because it shows that transformation doesn't begin with the act of leaving. It begins much earlier, in the thoughts you begin to allow, in the truths you finally dare to face. Dorothy began to realize that life wasn't her destiny. It was a choice she was making every day by deciding to stay. And when you understand that, everything changes. Because then you realize, if it's a choice, then you can choose differently. What if the courage to start over was the true secret to youth? Comment below. Which moment in your life would you choose to relive if you had the chance to start over? But now comes the part that truly separates those who dream from those who act. 30 years. Let that dimension sink for a second. That's more than 10,000 days, 10,000 dawns carrying the same weight on her chest. While the world outside evolved, while technologies emerged, while people around her lived their transformations, Dorothy remained trapped in a routine of silent terror that seemed endless. And here's the question everyone asks, but few truly understand. What keeps someone in such a situation for so long? The answer is more complex than it seems. It's not a lack of strength. It's not stupidity. It's not naivete. It's a devastating psychological mechanism that gradually erodes your ability to believe in any other possible reality. Think about it this way. When you wake up afraid for a year, that's traumatic. When you wake up afraid for 5 years, it becomes your new normal. But when you wake up afraid for 30 years, that becomes your identity. You forget who you were before the fear. You forget that life exists without this constant tension. Dorothy didn't stay because she wanted to. She stayed because, at some point during those 3 decades, the imprisonment ceased to be merely physical or emotional. It became mental. The hidden truth is that long-term abuse doesn't just hurt the body and heart. It reprograms your mindset. It distorts your perception of reality. It convinces you that you are incapable of surviving outside of it. And the more time passes, the more that belief solidifies. It's as if each passing year is another layer of cement around her, making it impossible to see the exit door. And there's another cruel factor in this equation: age. When Dorothy reached 50, 60 years old, the world around her began to reinforce this narrative of powerlessness. Because society teaches that after a certain age, you've already given what you had to give, that now it's time to accept, to conform, to stop dreaming of radical changes. So imagine carrying the weight of abuse and still hearing, even subtly, that you're too old to start over. This combination is devastating. That's why so many people remain trapped in unsustainable situations until the end of their lives. But there's something no one tells you about time. It's not just destructive. It can also be revealing, because it was precisely the accumulation of those 30 years that eventually showed Dorothy that she had nothing left to lose. There was no more time to wait for the perfect moment. There was no more room to be afraid of fear. The very weight of the journey became the force that would propel her outward. And what a beautiful paradox. What held her back for so long ended up being what set her free. And it is precisely at this point that Dorothy's story becomes even more intense, because the decision to leave did not come easily. And it is precisely at this point that Dorothy's story becomes even more intense, because the decision to leave did not come easily. There comes a moment in everyone's life when they're stuck in an unsustainable situation, and everything changes. It's not necessarily a grand or dramatic event. Sometimes it's something small, almost insignificant to an outsider, but which internally causes an earthquake. For Dorothy, that moment happened one ordinary morning in front of the bathroom mirror. She was getting ready, as she had done every day for decades, when she stopped and really looked at herself. It wasn't a quick, automatic glance. It was a deep, painful, revealing look. And what she saw there was devastating and liberating at the same time. She saw a 65-year-old woman who looked 80. She saw the tired eyes of someone who had given up on herself long ago. She saw the wrinkles etched not by time, but by constant tension. And in that instant, a question pierced her mind like an arrow. How many years do I have left? 5, 10, 15 if I'm lucky? And am I going to waste every single one of them here, in this silent hell? That was the turning point. It wasn't courage that suddenly appeared. It was clarity, a brutal and necessary clarity about the impact that life was having on her. Dorothy realized that if she didn't run away now, she would never know what it was like to truly live. She would never know what it was like to wake up without fear. She would never know what it was like to make a decision without calculating the emotional consequences that would follow. She would never know who she really was beneath all those layers of submission and silence. And here's the great shift in mindset. Age no longer mattered. Do you know why? Because Dorothy finally understood that it's never too late to choose dignity, that 5 years of peace are worth more than 20 years in prison, that dying free, even tomorrow, is better than living imprisoned for another decade. The fear of staying became greater than the fear of leaving. And when that balance tips, when the terror of remaining surpasses the terror of the unknown, that's when transformation becomes inevitable. But understand one important thing. This decision didn't come with certainty. It wasn't like in the movies, where the protagonist lifts her head, takes a deep breath, and walks away with an epic soundtrack playing in the background. Dorothy was terrified. She had no savings, no detailed plan, no guarantee that it would work. But she had something more valuable. The conviction that staying meant dying inside every day, and leaving meant at least trying to be truly alive. That was the revelation that changed everything. And that's why her story is so powerful, because it shows that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to act despite it. It's looking at your own fragility, your own age, all the uncertainties the future holds, and still taking the first step. But what nobody tells you is that running away is just the beginning. Dorothy left home one Tuesday afternoon, carrying only a small suitcase with a few clothes and documents. There were no goodbyes, no elaborate explanations. It was silent, almost anticlimactic for something she had mentally rehearsed so many times. She simply left, and in the first few days, the feeling was one of pure relief. She had succeeded. She had really done it. But then, little by little, something unexpected began to emerge. Emptiness. No one prepares you for the shock of freedom. It seems contradictory, doesn't it? How can something so desired be so disorienting? But the truth is that Dorothy had spent 30 years having her every move watched, every decision questioned, every thought controlled. And now? Now she woke up and no one was there to dictate what she should do. No one was monitoring her lunch break. No one was judging her choices. No one was imposing absurd rules. And that, however liberating it may seem, was terrifying. For the first time in decades, Dorothy needed to learn to be herself. And here's one of the most profound revelations about long-term abuse. It doesn't just hurt you, it erases you. It eliminates your preferences, your tastes, your opinions, until you become a walking shadow. So when Dorothy found herself free, she realized she no longer knew who she was. She didn't know what kind of food she liked to eat. She didn't know what TV show to watch. She didn't know if she preferred to wake up early or sleep late. These were simple, mundane decisions that anyone makes without thinking. But for her, each choice was a painful reminder of how much time she had wasted being someone else. And then came loneliness, that dense loneliness that weighs on your shoulders and makes you question whether you made the right decision. Because at least, before she had company, even if it was toxic and destructive company, now she was truly alone. Alone with her thoughts, alone with her fears, alone with the deafening silence of an empty apartment. Behind the scenes of this newfound freedom, Dorothy faced a silent battle, the temptation to go back. Yes, even after everything, even knowing what she had left behind, there were moments when she thought about going back. because the known, however destructive it may be, sometimes seems safer than the unknown. But every time that thought arose, she remembered that look in the mirror. It reminded her of the tired woman she had become, and it reminded her that it's never too late to give yourself a second chance, that starting over at 65 was better than giving up on herself forever. This initial period was an emotional roller coaster. Days of hope interspersed with nights of despair, moments of pride for having had courage, followed by panic attacks about the future. Dorothy was going through what few have the courage to go through, the process of rebirth. And every rebirth hurts. Every new beginning requires you to rebuild yourself from scratch. But it was precisely in that emptiness, in that initial solitude, that something began to blossom. 3 weeks after her escape, on an absolutely ordinary Saturday morning, Dorothy sat in the small kitchen of the apartment she had rented. She made a cup of coffee, something she had done automatically for decades, and sat by the window. The sun streamed in softly, illuminating the simple table, and she sat there in silence, holding the warm cup in her hands. And then it happened. Something so subtle it almost went unnoticed, yet so profound that it changed everything. Dorothy realized she was breathing differently. It wasn't panting. It wasn't that trapped breathing of someone who's always on high alert. It was a full, calm, deep breath. She put her hand to her chest and felt there was no tension there. There wasn't that lump in her throat that had been with her for so long that she couldn't even remember what it was like to live without it. There wasn't the constant tightness that made her feel like she was always on the verge of a panic attack. That was peace, a genuine peace, without asterisks, without conditions. And Dorothy began to cry, not from sadness, not from pain, but from a profound and moving realization. She had forgotten that this feeling existed. She had forgotten that it was possible to wake up and simply exist without calculating risks, without measuring words, without preparing for the next emotional attack. It was as if, for the first time in 30 years, her body had finally let its guard down. This moment marks a crucial turning point in the journey of anyone rebuilding after trauma, because it's easy to physically escape a situation. The difficult part is escaping emotionally. The body holds on to memories that the mind tries to forget. Muscles get used to tension. The nervous system adapts to a permanent state of alert. And even when you leave, even when you are objectively safe, the body still doesn't know it. It still takes weeks, months, sometimes years for it to finally understand. It's over. You're free. For Dorothy, that morning was confirmation that she had made the right decision. It was physical, tangible proof that freedom wasn't just an abstract concept or a distant dream. It was real. It was happening inside her, cell by cell, breath by breath. And for the first time since she left, she had no doubts. She didn't think about going back. She didn't question whether she had made the right choice, because now she knew, deep in her soul, what it meant to live without fear. That fearless sigh was the beginning of an even greater transformation. Dorothy began to notice other small changes. She smiled more easily, slept better, and could concentrate on simple things like reading a book or watching a movie without constantly being on edge. The impact of peace on her mental and physical health was visible. She seemed younger, lighter, more alive. And here's the great lesson. It's never too late to rediscover peace. It doesn't matter how many years you've spent at war with yourself or with someone else. It doesn't matter how long your body has been tense, your heart racing, your mind in panic. The body has an incredible capacity for healing when it is finally allowed to rest. Comment below. I breathed again. If you've ever experienced a moment where you finally felt you could let your guard down and simply be yourself without fear. And that feeling of peace was just the beginning of something much bigger to come. Dorothy quickly understood that escaping and breathing without fear were immense achievements, but they weren't enough. She needed to rebuild herself from within, and that required more than simply staying away from danger. It required work. It required a different kind of courage, the courage to look at her own wounds and begin to heal them. That's when she made one of the most important decisions of her new life, to seek professional help. At 66 years old, Dorothy entered a therapy office for the first time. At first it was strange. Talking about herself, about her pain, about her fears, was something she had never done. For decades, her needs had been ignored, her voice silenced. Now, someone was genuinely interested in listening to her, in understanding her story, in helping her process all that accumulated trauma. And little by little, session after session, Dorothy began to unpack 30 years of pain. It wasn't easy. There were sessions where she cried so much she could barely speak. There were moments when she questioned whether it was really worth reliving it all. But there were also moments of profound clarity, of understanding, of self-forgiveness. Alongside therapy, Dorothy began doing something that seemed silly, but which had a gigantic impact on her emotional recovery. She began to rediscover small pleasures, things that are automatic for most people, but that for her were new or distant memories of her youth. She went to a bookstore and bought a book she wanted to read, not because someone approved, but simply because she wanted to. She tried different flavors of ice cream until she discovered her favorite. She started walking in the park in the morning, just to feel the fresh air on her face. She learned to cook new recipes, just for the pleasure of creating something. These small acts were, in fact, great internal revolutions, because every choice she made for herself was an affirmation that she mattered, that her preferences had value, that she deserved pleasure and lightness. Dorothy wasn't just surviving. She was learning to live for the first time in adulthood, and that's a profound thing to say. Imagine spending more than 30 years just existing, and only at 66 finally beginning to truly live. Another crucial aspect of her rebuilding was learning to trust again. Not only others, but mainly herself. Trusting her own judgment, her own decisions, her own intuition. The abuse had destroyed her self-confidence so completely that she literally needed to relearn how to believe in herself. And it's never too late to do that. It's never too late to regain the trust that someone stole from you. Dorothy also began to reconnect with old dreams, dreams she had buried so long ago that she barely remembered they existed. She had always wanted to learn to paint. So, for the first time in her life, she bought paints and canvases and began. It didn't matter if it was good or bad. What mattered was that she was doing something simply because she wanted to, simply because it made her happy. Write in the comments, "My dream still lives," and tell us what that dream from your youth is that you still carry inside you, waiting for the right moment to come true. But Dorothy's transformation was far from over, because she was about to discover something even more powerful. About a year after her escape, Dorothy was in a support group for survivors of domestic violence. She had started attending these meetings as part of her healing process, but on that particular day, something different happened. A younger woman, around 40 years old, was there for the first time, visibly shaken, questioning whether or not she should leave her abusive relationship. And then Dorothy did something she never imagined she would do. She raised her hand and began to speak. For the first time, Dorothy shared her complete story with strangers. She spoke of the 30 years of silence, of her escape at 65, of the paralyzing fear that almost prevented her from acting, and of the freedom she finally found on the other side. Her voice trembled at first, but grew firmer with each sentence, and when she finished, the silence in the room was profound. Several women were crying, including the one who had just arrived. After the meeting, 3 people came to thank Dorothy personally, saying that her story had changed something within them. It was at that moment that Dorothy realized her voice, silenced for so long, now had power. Not the power to control or manipulate, but the power to inspire, to give hope, to show that it was possible. And she decided she wasn't going to waste it. Dorothy began to share her story more openly. First in support groups, then in community centers, eventually on online platforms where her message reached thousands of people. The impact was immense. She began receiving messages from women and men of all ages saying that her story had given them the courage to make their own difficult decisions. But what touched Dorothy most were the messages from older people, 60, 70, even 80 years old, who thought it was too late for them, but who, after learning about her journey, realized that it's never too late to start over. Dorothy unintentionally became a living symbol that there's no age limit for starting over, that you can be in the last chapter of your life and still rewrite the story completely. That courage has no expiration date and dignity, never expires. Her presence, her voice, Her simple existence as a free woman in her 70s was concrete proof that everything she said was true. But there's something even more beautiful in this part of the story. By helping others, Dorothy was also healing herself. Every time she told her story, every time she saw someone being inspired by her, Dorothy reconnected with her own strength. She saw, reflected in the eyes of those who listened, how courageous she had been, how much she had evolved, how much she mattered. And this fueled her transformation even more. Her mindset completely changed. From someone who thought she had nothing to offer, she became someone who knew her experience was valuable, that her voice deserved to be heard, that her life had purpose. And this didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual process of rediscovery, of reconnecting with herself, of realizing that she always had this power, she just needed permission to use it. And what Dorothy discovered by sharing her journey was something that would change not only her life, but the lives of countless others. You know, Dorothy's story isn't just about her. In fact, it never was. It's about a universal truth that we all need to hear, but that few have the courage to face. Lost time hurts. It hurts deeply. Dorothy lost 30 years of her life in an emotional prison. 30 years she will never recover. 30 years of experiences she never lived, of smiles she never gave, of memories she never created. And yes, that's painful to accept. It's a wound that never fully heals. But here's the revelation that changed everything for Dorothy, and that can change everything for you too. The time we still have is too precious to waste lamenting what's already gone. Dorothy had two choices at 65. She could remain trapped in the past, mentally reliving the 30 lost years, tormenting herself over what she hadn't done before, blaming herself for taking so long. Or she could look ahead and decide that the next 10, 15, 20 years would be lived with maximum intensity, enjoying every second of the freedom she had finally gained. And she chose the second option. She chose to live. And that decision is what makes her story so powerful, because it shows that no matter how old you are, no matter how long you've spent trapped in a suffocating situation, the next chapter of your life can begin now. Not tomorrow, not next year, not when conditions are perfect. Now. This is the message that Dorothy conveys to everyone who hears her story, that you don't need to be 20 years old to start over, that you don't need infinite resources, perfect health, or a foolproof plan. You only need one thing, the decision that you deserve more than you are experiencing now. And honestly, it doesn't matter if you are 30, 50, 70, or 90 years old. The life you have ahead of you is still worth living with dignity, lightness, and joy. Dorothy proves this every day. In her 70s, she lives a youth she never had. She experiences new things, meets new people, creates memories she once thought impossible. She laughs more, dreams more, loves more. And it all began with a single courageous decision, to choose herself, even when she thought it was too late. So, if you're reading this and feeling like you've missed your chance, that you've wasted too many opportunities, that it's too late to change, I need you to understand, you're wrong. Dorothy's story is living. Proof that it's never too late to start over. That courage has no expiration date. That your life, no matter how many years have passed, can still be redirected, rebuilt, reinvented. Lost time will hurt. It always will. But the time you still have, that's yours. And you can choose what to do with it. You can remain stuck in what was, or you can start building what can still be. Dorothy chose the second path, and that choice changed everything. Write in the comments, my next chapter starts now. If you're ready to make that choice too. If you're ready to believe that there's still time to live the life you deserve. But there's something I haven't told you about Dorothy yet. Something that will touch you even deeper. Today, Dorothy is 74 years old. And you know what's most incredible? She's living the youth she never had. I'm not speaking metaphorically or poetically. I'm speaking literally. Dorothy does things now at 74 that most people only do in their 20s or 30s. She traveled alone for the first time in her life last year. She learned to swim at 72 because she always wanted to, but was never allowed to. She started taking dance classes and discovered she had a natural talent that had remained hidden for decades. She smiles more than anyone I know. A genuine smile, the kind that comes from within, that lights up her whole face. She dreams more. She has a list of places she wants to visit. experiences she wants to have, people she wants to help. She lives more. She lives with an intensity that puts to shame many people half her age who complain that life has no meaning, that everything has already been done, that there is nothing new under the sun. And all of this, absolutely all of it, began with a single courageous decision: to choose herself. At 65, after 30 years of emotional imprisonment, Dorothy looked in the mirror and decided that she mattered, that she deserved freedom, that she deserved peace, that she deserved to truly live. And it was this decision, this moment of brutal and necessary clarity, that changed everything. The hidden truth that Dorothy's story reveals is this: transformation doesn't need time. It needs a decision. You can be in a situation that destroys you for decades, but a fresh start can happen in a single instant. The instant you finally say, enough. The instant you choose your own dignity over the false comfort of remaining in the familiar. The instant you decide that the years you have left will be lived on your terms, not on the terms of those who hold you captive. If Dorothy succeeded after 30 years, after all the accumulated trauma, after all the excuses she had to stay, then never, absolutely never say it's too late for you. It doesn't matter your age. It doesn't matter how much time you've already wasted. It doesn't matter how many times you've tried and failed. The next chapter of your life is waiting to be written, and you're the only one who can hold the pen. Dorothy is younger today than she was at 65, because youth has nothing to do with age. It has to do with vitality, with courage, with a willingness to experiment, to make mistakes, to try again. It has to do with believing that life still holds good surprises, meaningful encounters, precious memories, and that you can have at 20 or at 90. It's a choice, not a destiny. Dorothy's journey proves that human beings have an incredible capacity for rebirth, for reinvention, for finding light even after decades of darkness. And if she could do it, you can too. If she had courage at 65, you can have courage today, right now, regardless of your age. Comment below, I'm on this journey too, if you've decided to choose yourself, to give a chance to the life you truly deserve to live. And now, let me tell you what you can do with everything you've heard today. If you've made it this far, to this exact moment in the video, it's because Dorothy's story touched something within you, and I wanted to thank you for that, for staying, for giving your time and attention to a story that deserved to be told. If this content resonated with you, if you somehow saw yourself in this journey, or know someone who needs to hear this, leave a like below. This helps more people find this message and perhaps find the courage they need to take the first step. And look, if you like true stories like this, stories of people who decided to start over even when everything seemed impossible, subscribe to the channel, because every week I bring stories like this, stories that show that life can change at any age, at any time, stories that inspire, that move, that prove it's never too late. Also leave a comment saying, "This message was for me," if you felt this story arrived at the exact moment you needed to hear it. I read all the comments, and your participation here makes all the difference. Every word you write can inspire someone else going through the same thing. And before you go, there's a video here that perfectly complements this topic. It's about another person who also decided to start over after 60 with an equally powerful story. Click and stay with me there, because I'm sure you'll be moved again. Thank you for staying until the end. See you in the next video.